Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi tahirin. We are continuing our lessons of the history of philosophy, and we're following the book by Ayatollah Misbah Yazdi, which is called Philosophical Instructions. And this is the first section of this book where he has organized 10 lessons, technically 10 lessons, which may take us many lessons to complete here, maybe 15, 20 or more lessons, because we'll do 20 to 30 minutes each. So the next thing he talks about, because he was talking about the beginning of the philosophy and the Greek ancient Greece. Um, and we should note that amongst mankind, there has always been you could say, kind of philosophical thinking to an extent, meaning that people think about their origins, their destination, where they're going, things that really exist. There's some level of it, but as an organized system, an organized science, that is what philosophy became, where you took these different subjects and you put them together. Regardless, you have philosophical issues addressed in religion, but you don't have every topic that's addressed in philosophy addressed in religion. Like you have the section of Ilahiyat, the section of divinity, the section about does God exist? That is a fundamental principle of religion. This is the fundamental message of all messengers and prophets is that there is La ilaha illallah, no God except for Allah. Allah exists. Allah is the only God. So there are things which are talked about in religion, which we have a section for in philosophy, and we must be very careful when diving into this philosophy. Why? Because philosophy is a science where the thinkers try to be purely intellectual. Now, this doesn't always happen, but they try to be purely intellectual. But we must understand that in accordance with what we understand about Aql, intellect, if you remember that very first narration about Aql in Kitab al-Kafi, that Aql, that intellect, it recognizes Allah the Exalted, it realizes the authority of Allah the Exalted, it obeys Allah the Exalted, and Allah judges us according to our intellects. So this intellect, if we want to say we're intellectuals, we're philosophers, we're lovers of wisdom, then we should not be neglecting the authentic, the true Wahi, the true religion. Why? Because intellect tells you to go there. What a waste it would be to say you're an intellectual and then you leave the most important function, the most important realization of your intellect. So we must remember intellect takes us to a place, but it cannot go everywhere alone. It takes you somewhere, and then it takes you to a place where it cannot go alone. You have to bring your friend, the Wahi, the revelation with it. So intellect and true religion are together. They agree, but there's some things which religion can tell you which intellect couldn't reach on its own. Maybe intellect got two possibilities, three possibilities. These are all okay with the intellect. Religion comes and says it's this one is the correct view. Or there are things that intellect could never reach on its own. Religion comes and tells you this is the reality. So this is the thing, and sometimes people may mess up here because they think just intellect, 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 and they lose the religion. You could say, okay, do you even know about this aspect in religion? They say intellect, intellect, intellect. But do you even know about this aspect of religion? And if you go compare this aspect of religion with your intellectualism, there's not a problem, right? So this is an important thing. You must be very, very careful. Okay. So we want to support a kind of a kind of um, a kind of approach that is pro-intellectualism and primarily and pro-wahi. Okay, we want to promote the approach of them of using them both in an appropriate manner. In an appropriate manner. Okay, so he says in the book, he says about this. This is titled "The Appearance of Sophism, Safsata, and Skepticism." So in the 5th century BCE, before the Common Era, so they have in the Western world, they have this after Christ, uh, or we could say the Common Era, CE, and then you have BCE, before that time. So 5th century before, so that means they count backwards from that time. They count backwards, so this means the 5th century, you're talking about the 5th century BCE, so you're counting backwards. So in the 5th century BCE, scholars are mentioned who in the Greek language were called sophists. In the Greek language, you had scholars who were called the sophists. So that is maybe this word indicated that they were some kind of learned people. Nowadays, we know this word means Sophia, philosophias, philos, Sophia. Sophia means wisdom, right? So we'll probably get to it. Philo means is like lover of. So sophists, they're calling themselves these knowledgeable people, these wise people. That's what their name is indicating now. They are not really, let's look. So, but in spite of their vast information they had about the knowledge and then which was then current in that time, so the kind of information which was current in that time, like you get involved in contemporary sciences, contemporary issues, and maybe you could come across very knowledgeable. You come across very informed, just being aware of the current theories, the current ideas. So even though they were very informative, very much involved in maybe the current thinking or the current thoughts, they did not believe in fixed truths. So they did not believe in fixed truths. So realities are not fixed. Truths are not fixed. And they did not consider anything to be definitely known or certain. So this is a problem. There's no fixed truths, and nothing can be known, and nothing can be certain. This is bad. This is denial of reality and knowing reality. How many times we emphasize on in our classes about the requirement of having certitude and itminan, following the truth, seeking the evidences. How could we know anything if nothing can be known or certain and there's no fixed truths? What would the use be of any science or study if there was no fixed reality to study? If that reality was only this, if there's no fixed reality, it's not there. And we couldn't even know it. So as reported by historians of philosophy, these sophists, they were professional teachers who taught rhetoric and debate. You remember those from the ilm mantiq in that third level. So, and they trained defense lawyers. So I know, you probably can imagine in the Western world, there's lawyers. Some lawyers will argue anything for their client. So they trained people in debate and rhetoric, and they trained defense lawyers for courts. So this is a big issue. People, this is why debate is a problem. Not everybody, some of these things that we talked about in the third level of Mentic, people could misuse. Persuasion, debate, people can misuse. In the wrong hands, it's misused. Why? Because you're trying to win something without relying on propositions that are necessarily true. Yes, okay, if you rely on propositions which are true, okay. But if you're not, then you will do serious damage. It's a dangerous tool. So they trained defense lawyers for the courts, for which there was much demand at that time. This profession, this profession, this skill that they had required, this profession required the defense lawyer to be able to establish any claim and to be able to reject all sorts of opposing claims. So these lawyers, their skill would be that they would be deceptive. They would be able to establish any claim. They would, persuade people, argue their case, and try to establish any claim. And they would be trained to oppose and reject any sorts of opposing claims that you bring back to them. Dealing with this sort of teaching, which was often subject to fallacy, gradually brought about a kind of thinking according to which basically there is no truth beyond human thought. So because of this approach, it brought about a kind of thinking in the people that there is no truth outside of human thought, outside of what a person thinks. So there's a story about a man who jokingly said that in such and such a house, sweets are being given away. Says in Fulan's house, some sweets, some halwa is given away. You go there, it's free. In their simplicity, the people that heard this, they hurried to crowd around the door of the mentioned house. So people, they gathered when they heard this there's some sweets at this house, and they gathered and they crowded around this house. Little by little, the speaker himself, who told them that there were sweets at that house, began to become suspicious about the matter. And so as not to lose out on the chance for free sweets, he also joined them. So this story, I'm not saying it's a true story, but you could take a kind of example from it. It's say this guy, he says there's sweets over at so and so's house, and he sees large crowds gathering. Now he starts to think, oh, maybe there really is sweets there. Maybe there is really sweets there. So then he joined. I don't want to miss out on the sweets, so he goes and he joins them in the line to get some sweets. So here, this kind of thing is occurring with the sophist. Is said what he's suggesting here is that this kind of idea, this kind of occurrence was happening with the sophist. It seems as if the sophists also were victims of the same fate. By teaching fallacious methods to establish and deny claims, little by little, such tendencies came to appear in their own thinking, that basically truth and falsehood depend on human thought alone. And in conclusion, they would consider that no truth is there beyond human thought. So they became full of fallacy. They became fallacious and intellectually malicious and deceptive. And now you can understand a bit behind the phrase sophist as being somewhat insultive. Okay, so the expression of sophism, which meant wise, he says sage and learned, but sophism is like Sophia, is like I said, it means uh wisdom. So this expression sophism, due to being ascribed to such mentioned people, these people full of fallacy, full of problems in their thoughts, full of debate, denial of reality, thinking only what they think is true is true. It lost its fundamental meaning of wisdom, learned, and this kind of idea. So this word became, the original meaning it had became obsolete, became lost. And it came to be used as a symbol and as a sign for a way of thinking which was according to the fallacious, false methodology and reasoning of those people. Therefore, the meaning of this word changed. The word stayed the same, but the meaning has changed. And it came to be used as a symbol for such people. So much where nowadays, if we hear a false argument, which these things occur, as you know, you went through the logic classes, we introduced you briefly on these things. When there's a false argument, it could be sophism. It could be safsata. And we say this argument is sophism. People may be convinced, they may think it seems right, but because they're unaware, they're not experts, they're convinced on a false sophistic premises. So it is the same expression that in Arabic, in Lughatu Arabiya, has taken the form of sophistry. And the term safsata is derived from it. So this is the sophist. The sophists are these types of people, and eventually there was these sophists around, and we'll talk about it inshallah in the next lesson more. But then this guy named Socrates, he stood up against it, and he said, I am a lover of Sophia, a lover of wisdom. And he went and he debated with all these people who were considered as the story goes, and all these people that were considered as wise in Athens. He went debated with them, and he found that none of them, that he at least knew he wasn't wise. And these people, they knew, they were claiming they were, right? So this is how the story goes. There's more depth to it, more detail to it, but this is just what is narrated in the history. Um, anyways, he ended up upsetting these people quite a bit because he'd debate them and he disproved them, and he do this Socratic method, and these are written down in the works of Plato attributed. I don't know who originally wrote all of these, but they have these kinds of debates and dialogues between people and Socrates. So from Socrates is where the term philosophia, philosoph, philosophy is coined. A lover of Sophia, a lover of wisdom, which we'll talk about inshallah in the next lesson. Wa akhiru du'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.